I think this is a spot where a lot of people do not find a way to get all of the money in. Notice here the pot, once they get all in, is 338 big blinds. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com. I hope you're having a great day. Here we have another hand from the 200-400 No Limit Heads Up Battle featuring Daniel Negreanu and Doug Polk. At the time I'm making this video, Daniel Negreanu is down about 6.5 buy-ins over 1,000 hands. I think it sounds like a lot of money, 200-something thousand dollars. But in reality, 6.5 buy-ins is definitely a normal swing over 1,000 hands. That said, this hand we're about to review today illustrates a major skill that Doug Polk has that I'm not entirely sure Negreanu is implementing into his game yet. And this is where decent edges start to actually get manufactured. So let's take a look at this interesting spot. Here we have Doug Polk making a standard raise on the button. His name's Micro Stakes. Daniel Negreanu makes standard call out of the big blind. Nothing to see here. Flop comes King 7-3. Negreanu checks. Doug Polk elects to make a small bet. And you may say, why in the world is he betting small? Well, it turns out on this King 7-3 board that's pretty uncoordinated, Doug Polk should be making mostly a small or medium bet, as we can see when we give the solver these options: 2/3 pot, 42% pot, 20% pot, and check. Hands like King 7 suited in this scenario and King 7 offsuit mostly pick a 42% pot bet or a small 20% pot bet. And that's because your opponent's in pretty terrible shape and you don't really care if you keep them in the pot. So this is a spot where he does go relatively small, which seems to be GTO approved. Daniel Negreanu elects to call, as he should do with most of his hands in this scenario. He has King 5. We see King 5 offsuit calls essentially every time. Some of the suited hands elect to raise every once in a while, but this is a spot where with your top pair marginal kicker, you're going to want to call the vast majority of the time. And we see really he's not even doing a ton of raising here unless he has a very good hand for the most part, right? Take a look at the hands that are raising, like King Queen's really good. King 9's pretty good. Remember where it's King 7-3. 7s raises, 3s raises, 7-3 suited raises. And then some very junky draws. These are draws that you can raise and then easily fold if you get re-raised, right? So we see stuff like 6-4 raising, 5-4 raising, 6-5 raising, 9-6 suited for just total airball raising. So pretty cool to see that. Not sure many people actually do that though. This is a spot where I think a lot of people make the mistake of mostly raising with their best hands, perhaps with too many made hands, a little bit too weighted towards the made hands. And then whenever you get raised in this spot against someone who's raising with too many made hands, you just get to make a lot of snug folds. Anyway, Negreanu does make the good call in this scenario. Turn comes the 8. Negreanu checks, as he should do with his entire range. And now we have an interesting spot for Doug Polk. And I want to ask you what you would do in this spot before I show you what Doug Polk did and what the GTO solver does. Take a second, think about it. Type what you would do in the comments below. Would you check? Would you bet small? Would you bet medium? Or would you bet gigantic? Did you do it? Okay, good. You're back? All right, now that you're back, click like, click subscribe. I would appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the interactivity of these videos. Apparently you are. You're still here. Okay, so in this scenario, what most people do is they make a pretty big bet size, like 2/3 pot or maybe even full pot. But take a look at what Doug Polk does. He actually goes more than the size of the pot, about 1.5 times the size of the pot. And you may say, why in the world would you do that? Nothing can call you. But it turns out you actually can get called reasonably wide. So let's take a look at Polk's turn strategy. And whenever we give the solver these options, the giant bet is the one that's very often preferred. And take a look at the hands that are betting giant. These are going to be mostly King 8 and better. Okay, so remember the board over here is, so King 8 is 2 pair. Let's take a look at the weakest king that is betting, right? That's what we were trying to find out in this scenario. What's the weakest king that's betting big? It looks like King 9, because King 8 and King 7 are 2 pair, right? So King 9 and better are opting to bet big. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because if you look at Negreanu's range, King Queen and King Jack and King 10 and King 9 are all raising the flop sometimes, right? So whenever he does check call, he's going to have mostly weaker hands. So this is a spot where Doug Polk is going to be in great shape, and he should be going for this substantial overbet. And this is a spot where, I mean, if I was playing this hand, I'm sure I would have screwed it up and I would have bet small because I am not a world-class heads-up player, right? I'm learning just like all of you are. So this is a spot where Doug Polk should be using a big bet size with something like top pair, good kicker, and better. And when I say big, I do mean overpot. I don't know what Negreanu would have done in this scenario, but I have to presume he probably would not have gone for this overbet. And whenever you're taking one player's strategy against another player's strategy, if one player makes the play that just extracts additional value on a regular basis and the other player doesn't, that's where this edge that I mentioned in my introduction video to this heads-up match, this is where a lot of this edge is going to come from, because both players are going to play pre-flop pretty well. Both players are going to play the flop pretty well. But then when we get to these kind of abnormal scenarios on the turn in the river, this is where knowing how to play the strong GTO strategy is really going to shine, and I think Doug Polk probably does that a little bit better than Negreanu. So anyway, let's take a look at the other hands that are betting big. We have sets betting big. We have 10-9, Jack-9, Jack-10 betting big. These are all gut shots or open-ended straight draws. We have 9-6 for open-ended betting big. We have 9-5 for a gut shot betting big. 7-3 is two pair, right? That's opting for a big bet. Pocket threes is betting big. 5-4 for a gut shot bets big sometimes. Then we have over here Queen 5 and Queen 4 betting big, which is kind of abnormal. I'm not sure if Doug Polk's working that into his game or not. The thing is like, let's say you know in these scenarios that you're supposed to be betting big with your best hands and your obvious draws. Like, those aren't the hard hands to find, right? Like, and this is a pretty common spot, right? You raise pre-flop, get a kind of uncoordinated board, you bet, turns an 8, you have the best hand the majority of the time, you keep betting, and you often use a big size. That's not all that hard to figure out. The hard part is to figure out which bluffs to use. And like, if you slotted me in this scenario, I don't think I would have found the Queen 5, Queen 4, and Jack 4 big bluffs. And I mean, this is where, like, if I was playing Doug Polk, he would just be crushing me in this scenario because I would not be making the correct play, right? So need to find these sporadic bluffs that you need to be finding if you want to be a world-class heads-up player that I'm probably not finding. So anyway, Doug Polk does go for a big bet. Negreanu has an easy call. You may say, should he really call the overbet? And the answer is yes. Notice that the King 5 is actually in okay shape against a lot of these hands. He beats basically every draw. But notice by betting big, Polk's essentially polarized his range, right? He either has a very premium hand that beats the majority of Negreanu's range, or he has a draw that has a little bit of equity. And as we see in this spot, Daniel Negreanu should actually just call or fold the vast majority of the time. But he does get to fold a lot facing the big overbet. Notice here, King 5. Suited and offsuit call every time. You can't fold any king. Can you fold a 7? You can start folding the weaker 7s. Notice ace 7 doesn't really fold because it has that overcard, which is relevant sometimes in case you are against two pair, like in this case, right? Whereas the lower ones will fold a decent amount of the time. Okay? Now, going to the river. River is a 5. The card of death for Daniel Negreanu. He checks. And now, kind of like the turn, this is a spot where Doug Polk should be betting big. Notice here the pot is 13,000 chips. Negreanu has 41,000 behind. Ask yourself what you would do in this spot. Go ahead and quiz yourself again. If you feel like typing it in the comments, you might as well. But this is a spot where most people go for a pretty big bet, like 10,000, because they think, all right, my opponent has a king. I want to get paid, I'm going to bet 10,000. But in reality, if your opponent has a king, and some of the draws missed. Notice here, Jack 10 missed, 10-9 missed, random sporadic bluffs with the Queen 4 missed, right? Given all of these hands missed, and you do want to be able to bluff some of them, you should be using a very large bet. So the question is King 7 for top, well, basically top two pair, close enough to top two pair, top and middle pair, good enough to go for a giant value bet? And I think it probably is, because this hand is essentially the nuts, given the way that the board has run out. And the hand's played out. I mean, you're really not losing to much at all in this spot that Negreanu could have. So King 7 is basically the nuts. And when you have the nuts, very often, if you're trying to play good GTO poker, you're going to want to use a big overbet. So the question is, what is a big overbet? Well, it turns out a 300% pot all-in bet is the preferred size in this scenario. You're going to find in spots like this, a solver much prefers to use a giant bet for the most part, with all of your absolute best hands and some bluffs, and then a smaller bet, 50% pot in this scenario, with your thinner value hands that are likely good, but still could lose. So let's take a look at what Solver does. Solver goes all in with King 8 for two pair, King 7 for two pair, 8s and 7s for sets. 9-6 made the straight, right? So 9-6 is betting big. Pocket 3s for the set. Then we have 10-6 betting big. What is 10-6? 10-6 is nothing, right? So here we have a nothing hand that's betting big. We also have Jack 6, Queen 6, Jack 4 every once in a while. And so basically you're using some of your busted draws, usually ones that block the 6, as your big bet size. Also notice Jack 9 and 10-9 are opting to bet big the majority of the time too. So whenever Polk is betting giant, he has the balanced ratio of premium hands, essentially 2 pairs and better, good 2 pairs and better, and also some total junk. And then when he bets small, take a look at what's betting small. We have pocket aces for 1 pair, ace king 1 pair, king queen 1 pair, 7-3 suited, 8-3 suited for the worst 2 pair, king 3 for, pretty good 2 pair, but not the nuts. And that makes sense, right? You're going to see that this is what the solver very often does. It's betting big with most of the best hands and some junk. It's betting small with most of the strong but non-nut hands that can still get called by worse hands, plus a little bit of premium hands and a smaller portion of junk. And then it's checking a lot of the hands that can reasonably check call, plus a few just total give-ups. So in this scenario, notice that the bet small range also does contain hands like a little bit of pocket kings, which is the nuts, right? A little bit of king 7, which is the nuts, right? Also notice hands like aces check sometimes. Ace king check sometimes. These kings, king jack, pretty good hand. You would think you could value bet it, but notice it actually does check a lot of the time. It's not quite good enough to go for value, given Polk made this big turn bet and strengthened Negreanu's range substantially. So in this scenario, what does Polk do? Does he make the standard play a lot of people make of betting 2/3 pot or something like that? No, he finds the good, fundamentally sound GTO play. And notice, Polk has played this hand like a perfect GTO robot. And to be fair, Negreanu has 2. He's supposed to call pre-flop, check call flop, check call turn, and check call river, and lose all of his money to micro stakes Doug Polk. Let's see what the solver recommends for Negreanu in this scenario. As you can see, Negreanu's river strategy, pretty nasty spot. As you can see, even king 5 for 2 pairs should fold sometimes. Notice king 3 calls, also 8-3 for 2 pair folds sometimes. So this is a pretty bad spot where Negreanu's kind of just roped into making a decent amount of calls. Notice he should be folding a ton though. Like if he has king queen, king jack, king 10, these are all folds. And you may say, wow, really fold? Top pair, heads up? Yeah. You're not trying to fold top pair too often, but whenever your opponent overbets the turn and overbets the river, they're essentially announcing they are super polarized. And notice here that some of the bluffs that Polk had on the turn actually got there on the river, right? Notice 9-6 got there and 6-4 got there. And when all of those hands come in, you just have to start making pretty big folds. But this is a perfectly played hand by Doug Polk, a bit of a cooler. I mean, to be fair, like it's kind of unfortunate for Negreanu that he first off, made top pair against 2 pair, right? That's kind of unlucky to begin with. And whenever you river the other 2 pair, you're pretty much just roped into calling. You can't do anything about that. But I think this is a spot where a lot of people do not find a way to get all of the money in. Notice here the pot, once they get all in, is 338 big blinds. I mean, let's just go back to this and imagine how a lot of people play it. A lot of people make the same play on the flop. On the turn, though, they bet something like 2,000 and get called. Instead, Doug Polk went 5,000, so he extracted an additional 3,000 there. Notice the pot would be 6,000 less right now. Pot would be 6K on the river. A lot of people check into Negreanu's shoes. Polk bets like 5,000. Negreanu would make the call most likely. Maybe raising as merit, but probably call. So in that scenario, Doug Polk would bet 6 on the river. Instead, he got to bet 40. So he basically extracted an additional, I don't even know how many chips, something like 30,000 chips or 30,000 chips, 40,000 chips on this hand compared to what most people would have done. And that's substantial, right? It's a lot of money that Doug Polk made in this hand just by playing the good, strong GTO strategy that I think a lot of other people don't do. So that's going to be it for this hand. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like this type of in-depth content, check out my training site, pokercoaching.com. You can actually get a free membership at pokercoaching.com/free. We have lots of in-depth content using Pio Solver, Munker Solver. We have the GTO expert, Michael Acevedo. He knows more about Pio Solver than anybody. And he has lots and lots of content discussing how to apply solver work to tournaments. We also have Matt Affleck using solvers discussing cash games. Faraz Jaka recently went through one of his $5,000 buy-in tournament deep runs using the solver to go through lots and lots of common spots. So make sure you check that out at pokercoaching.com/free. Good luck in your games. Have a great, great day. And I'll talk to you next time.